Orchestrated original memoir narrative with new character names and financial details. Orchestrated original memoir narrative with new character names and financial details. The call came on a Tuesday, which is a thing I remember because Tuesdays were the days I didn't work late and I almost let it go to voicemail. My sister never called. We texted, mostly grocery store memes, a thumbs up, the occasional photo of her dog doing something stupid. So when her name lit up the screen at 6:40 in the evening while I was standing over a pot of pasta water that wouldn't boil, I knew before I answered that something had happened to our mother. She fell, my sister said. No hello. In the kitchen, I think it's a stroke. The ambulance is here. I turned off the stove. I remember that. I turned off the stove and stood there in my socks on the cold kitchen tile, and Aaron looked up from the couch and saw my face and was already standing, already reaching for his keys, and the whole evening just folded up and went away. That was the beginning of it, though I didn't know it then. I thought it was the beginning of my mother getting sick. It turned out to be the beginning of losing my sister too, except that part happened so slowly and so quietly that I couldn't tell you the exact day it was finished. There was no fight. That's the thing people always expect. They expect a screaming match, a thrown plate, somebody storming out of a Thanksgiving. It wasn't like that at all. It was more like watching a tide go out. You look up one day and the water's just gone, and you can't remember the last wave. Let me back up. My sister is 4 years older than me. Her name is Camille, and growing up, she was the one who knew things. She knew how to French braid. She knew which boys were bad news. She knew how to forge our mother's signature on the permission slips I forgot about until the morning they were due. When our dad left, I was 9, she was 13. She was the one who explained it to me, sitting on the edge of my bed with her knees pulled up, telling me it wasn't because of anything I did. She was 13 years old and she said that to me like an adult. I worshipped her. I want that on the record before I tell you the rest, because everything that came later only hurt the way it did, because of how much I loved her first. We grew up in a small ranch house outside Akron, Ohio. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a basement that flooded every spring, and a kitchen with yellow countertops our mother kept saying she'd replace and never did. After our dad left, our mother worked at a dental office doing the billing, and she did it for 31 years. And that house and that job were the entire architecture of her life. She paid that mortgage off when I was in college. I remember her calling me, crying, saying she owned it now, the whole thing, every brick. I didn't understand then what it meant to a woman like her, a woman whose husband had walked out and left her with 2 girls and a flooding basement, to own something free and clear. I understand it now. God, do I understand it now? So, the stroke? It wasn't the worst kind. She survived it, but it took her left side and most of her words. And the doctors use that phrase they use, she'll need a lot of support going forward, which is a clean little sentence that contains an entire collapse inside it. Going forward, into what? Here's where I have to be honest about who did what, because that turned out to matter more than I ever could have guessed. Camille lived 20 minutes from our mother. I lived 4 hours away, in Columbus, with Aaron and our son, who was 3 at the time. Camille had the geography. But Camille also had a full-time job she loved and a husband, Greg, who traveled for work and 2 teenagers and a life that was already stretched as tight as a drum. So in those first weeks, when we were both at the hospital every day, we had the conversation that families have. We sat in the cafeteria with the terrible coffee and we figured out who would do what. What I decided mostly because I'm the one who said it first, was that I would handle the hands-on care. I'd take leave from my job. I'd move into our mother's house. I'd do the bathing and the feeding and the physical therapy appointments and the long, terrible nights. And Camille would handle the business side. That's how she put it. She had the head for it, she said, and she was right, she did. She'd manage the bills, the insurance, the bank, all the paperwork, because Camille was organized in a way I have never been. She color-coded things. She had a label maker. So she'd take power of attorney. That was her phrase. She explained it like it was nothing. It's just so I can talk to the bank without you having to drive up every time, and I'd take care of Mom. I want you to notice how reasonable that sounds. I want you to notice it because I've replayed that cafeteria conversation maybe 1,000 times, looking for the moment I should have seen it, and I can't find it. It was reasonable, it was loving. We were two daughters trying to save our mother, and we divided the work the way you'd think made sense. And the way it made sense handed my sister the keys to everything and handed me the diapers. I don't say that bitterly. Or, I do, a little. I'm working on it. So I moved into the ranch house, the yellow countertops, the flooding basement. I slept in my childhood bedroom, which my mother had turned into a sewing room that she never sewed in. And I pushed the sewing machine into the corner and put my son's pack and play next to a single bed that was too short for me now. Aaron came up on weekends when he could. We were a marriage conducted in highway hours for a while, and I'll be grateful to that man until the day I die for not once making me feel like I'd chosen wrong. The caregiving. I'm not going to dwell on it, because if you've done it you already know, and if you haven't, no amount of words will get it across. I'll just tell you the texture of it. It's getting your mother, who used to French braid your hair, to the toilet in time and sometimes not in time. It's the way she'd cry from frustration when the word she wanted wouldn't come, just bang her good hand on the armrest and cry, and there was nothing to do but hold her. It's the smell of the pink hospital soap and the specific squeak of the wheelchair on the kitchen linoleum and the way the physical therapist, a kind woman named Rosa, would say, "Good job, Mom," in a voice that made my own throat close up. It's small and it's enormous, and it lasted, all told, a little over 2 years. Camille came on Sundays. I want to be fair. She came most Sundays, and she'd bring a casserole and she'd sit with our mother and hold her hand and talk to her about the grandkids, and our mother's face would light up the way it never lit up for me. Because I was the one who made her do her exercises, and I was the one who took the second helping away, and Camille was the one who showed up smelling like outside with a story about the kids. I didn't resent that. You stop wanting to be the fun one pretty fast. But I noticed it, and on those Sundays Camille and I would sit in the kitchen after Mom went down and we'd drink wine and we'd be sisters for 2 hours, and those were the best 2 hours of my week. And I held on to them. And I think that's part of why I didn't see what I should have seen, because I needed her too much to look closely. Here's the first thing. It was such a small thing. About a year in, I went to use the debit card for our mother's account. There was a household card. We'd set it up for groceries and her prescriptions, the things I bought day to day. And it declined at the Giant Eagle. Just declined. Right there in the checkout line with my cart full of her Ensure and her stool softers and the people behind me sighing. I put it on my own card and I called Camille from the parking lot, embarrassed, like I'd done something wrong, and she said, "Oh shoot, I'm so sorry. I moved some money around to cover her supplemental insurance and I forgot to put it back. It's totally my fault. I'll Venmo you for the groceries." And she did. She Venmo'd me $61 within the hour with a little note that said, "Sorry, sis," and I felt bad for even calling. That happened maybe 3 more times over the next year, always with an explanation, always with a quick repayment, always with that warm, apologetic tone that made me feel like the one who'd overreacted. "Money's moving around in there," she'd say. "It's complicated. The insurance is a nightmare. The Medicaid stuff is a nightmare." And it was a nightmare. I'd done enough of the medical side to know that the financial side of long-term care in this country is a labyrinth designed by demons. So I believed her. Of course I believed her. She was my sister. She had the label maker. She knew things. My mother died on a morning in March. There was still snow on the ground. I was holding her hand and Rosa the hospice nurse was there, and it was, as these things go, peaceful. I'd like to tell you Camille was there, but she wasn't. She was 20 minutes away and the decline had been fast at the end. 2 days, and I'd called her the night before and said I thought it was close, and she said she'd come first thing, and first thing wasn't soon enough. She got there an hour after. She fell across our mother's body and sobbed in a way I'd never heard from her. This animal sound. And I held my sister while she shook. And I actually thought, standing in that room with our dead mother still warm, I thought, at least we have each other. The funeral was the last good day. I'll always think of it that way, which is a strange thing to say about a funeral, but Camille and I planned it together, side by side, and we cried together and we laughed together, remembering the yellow countertops. And the night after, we sat in the empty house and drank the rest of the good wine and talked until 3 in the morning. And it felt like the grief was a thing we were going to carry together, 2 daughters, the way we carried everything since we were kids on the edge of a bed. Then the estate started. I didn't know anything about estates. Why would I? Our mother had a will. Camille had handled getting it drawn up years before, just to be safe, she'd said. And I never read it, because why would I read it? My sister was handling the business side. So when the lawyer's office called to schedule the reading, which is apparently not really a thing they do dramatically like in movies, but is just a meeting, I figured it would be simple. The house split between us. Whatever was in the accounts split between us. That's what our mother always said she wanted. She said it to both of us, separately and together, for years. You girls split everything 50-50. I don't want any fighting. I drove up to Akron for the meeting. Camille was already there when I arrived, sitting in the lawyer's waiting room with her good coat on and a folder in her lap. And she gave me a hug that I would later realize lasted a beat too long, the way you hold someone when you already know something they don't. The lawyer was a tired-looking man in his 60s named Mr. Dell. He had reading glasses and a way of not quite meeting your eyes. He went through the will. The will said what I expected. 50-50. Everything split between the 2 daughters, equally. And then he got to what was actually left. The house had a mortgage on it. I remember I laughed, a short confused laugh, because that didn't make sense. No, I said. She paid that off years ago. She called me crying. She owned it free and clear. Mr. Dell looked at his papers and then he looked at Camille, just for a second, and Camille was looking down at her folder, and he said, in this careful, neutral voice, that a home equity line of credit had been taken out against the property approximately 3 years prior, drawn down to about $190,000, and the various bank accounts contained, all told, a little under $4,000. I want to describe the next 30 seconds because I think it's the closest I've ever come to understanding what people mean when they say the floor dropped out. I didn't understand what I was hearing. My brain literally could not assemble the pieces into a picture. $190,000. Where would a woman on Social Security and a dental office pension and Medicaid get? And then I understood that it wasn't where she got it. It was where it went. I turned to my sister. And Camille was crying already, quiet tears, very controlled, and she said, I was going to tell you. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you for months. I'm going to try to relate the next part the way it actually unfolded, not the way I understood it later, because the understanding came in pieces over the following year, and most of it came not from Camille, who, once it began to come apart, said less and less, but from the bank records I eventually paid a forensic accountant $900 to walk me through. The home equity line had been opened with the power of attorney, the one we'd set up in the hospital cafeteria so she wouldn't have to drive up every time. It turned out that document let her do considerably more than talk to the bank. It let her borrow against our mother's house in our mother's name, while our mother sat in a wheelchair losing her words, and it let her move that money into accounts I never saw. Where did it go? This is the part that still, 2 years later, can wake me up at 4 in the morning. It didn't go to a gambling addiction or a secret apartment or a man. It would almost be easier if it had. It went to Camille's life. It went to keeping Greg and Camille's life floating. Greg's travel job, it turned out, had ended badly about 3.5 years before. There'd been a layoff she never mentioned. And they had 2 teenagers and a mortgage of their own and a lifestyle they could not bring themselves to shrink. And our mother's house was just sitting there, paid off, this big silent reservoir of money. And Camille had the key to it, and she told herself, I am certain she told herself, that she'd put it all back, that it was a bridge loan, that nobody was getting hurt, that Mom would never know and Mom didn't, and I think Camille genuinely believed for a long time that there'd be money coming. A settlement, a new job, something that would let her quietly refill it before it ever mattered. It never came. And our mother died with $190,000 of debt strapped to the only thing she'd ever been proud of owning. I have to tell you that for a while, sitting in that lawyer's office, I tried to make it not be what it was. That's a thing that happens with people you love. Your mind does anything to avoid the conclusion. I thought, maybe she did it for mom's care. Maybe the Medicaid's been down. Maybe there's an explanation that makes this. And I turned to Mr. Dell and I asked him, was this for her care, the medical, the home health? Was this money spent on mom? And Mr. Dell, who I think felt sorry for me, said gently that the medical expenses had been largely covered by Medicaid and that the line of credit withdrawals did not correspond to medical billing. He said it kindly. He was telling me my sister stole from our dying mother, and he said it the way you tell someone their flight was delayed. We drove home in separate cars, obviously, and somewhere on Route 8 I had to pull over because I couldn't see through what was happening to my face. So now I'll tell you the part the channel name is about, the quiet part. Because what you'd expect, what I would have expected, is that I'd have called her screaming, that there'd have been a confrontation, an explosion, that I'd have shown up at her door. And there was a little of that. I sent her one text that night that I'm not proud of, that I won't repeat, that came from the rawest place in me. But after that, what actually happened was so much worse than a fight, because a fight is two people who are still in a relationship. What happened to us was a relationship ending in slow motion through professionals. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about being stolen from by family. You can't just be angry, you have to decide what to do, and your choices are all unthinkable. The lawyer explained that I had a case. I could pursue it. Power of attorney is a fiduciary duty. Those were the words. Fiduciary duty, and what Camille had done was a breach of it, and possibly a crime, and I could go to the bank, and I could go to the police, and I could file in probate court, and I could file in probate court, and I could, in plain English, try to have my sister prosecuted and bankrupt her and put her teenager's college money in her house on the line to recover what she'd taken from our mother's house. Or I could not. And those were really the only two roads. There was no road where I got my mother's house back whole and also kept my sister. The money was gone. It had gone into mortgage payments and groceries and a transmission and a kid's braces, and the 1,000 invisible expenses of a family quietly drowning. You can't get that back. You can only decide whether to destroy the people who took it. I'll tell you what I did, but first I'll tell you about the texts, because the texts are how I learned what quiet really means. For a few weeks after the lawyer's office, Camille tried. She'd text me long messages, apologies, explanations, history I never meant. I always intended to. You don't understand the pressure we were under. Greg and I was going to. Mom would have wanted us to help each other. That last one I had to put my phone in a drawer over. And I didn't answer them, not because I was punishing her, though maybe I was, a little. I didn't answer them because I genuinely did not know what to say. What do you say? Every response I drafted was either a scream or a forgiveness, and I wasn't ready for either, so I said nothing, and the silence stretched, and her texts got shorter as they went unanswered, and then they got further apart. And then there was the day, I couldn't tell you the date, when I realized she'd stopped sending them. That was the tide going out. Not a slammed door, just the slow discovery, weeks later, that the water was gone. We had to communicate, though, because of the estate, so we did. But it was through Mr. Dell, and then later through her own lawyer when she got one, and there is something so obscene about getting an email from your sister's attorney, your sister who taught you to ride a bike, regarding the disposition of the family, real property. We sold the house, we had to. With the line of credit and the back taxes, there was nothing else to do. The yellow countertops, the flooding basement, the bedroom where my son slept in his pack-and-play next to my mother's dying. We sold all of it. And after the bank took its $190,000, and the lawyers took theirs, my mother's entire life, 31 years at the dental office, came out to a little over $11,000 split two ways. I got $5,600 and some change for my mother. That's the number. I cared for her for 2 years. I held her hand while she died, and the estate of the woman who owned that house, free and clear, and called me crying about it, paid out $5,600 because the rest had quietly walked out the door in my sister's purse. Now, what I did. I didn't prosecute. I want to explain why, not to make myself sound noble, because I don't feel noble. I feel like someone who made the only choice she could live with, and isn't sure to this day it was the right one. I went and saw a lawyer of my own, a different one, a sharp woman in Columbus, and I sat in her office and I laid it all out, and I asked her flatly, what happens if I go after her? And she told me the truth. She said civilly, I might recover some eventually after years and tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees by forcing the sale of Camille and Greg's house, which would put my niece and nephew, my niece, Maddie, who is named after our grandmother, out on the street in the middle of high school. Criminally, she said, it was up to the prosecutor, but elder financial abuse of a dependent adult is a real charge, and Camille could, in the worst case, go to prison. And I sat there in that nice office and I imagined Maddie, who used to fall asleep on me when she was a baby, getting the news that her mother was going to prison because her aunt called the police. And I imagined my mother, and this is the thing that decided it. I imagined my mother watching all of it from wherever she is, watching her two girls, the ones she made promise not to fight, destroying each other in courtrooms over the wreckage of her house. And I knew with total certainty that it would have been worse to her than the theft itself. She would rather have lost the whole house than seen us do that to each other. You girls split everything 50-50. I don't want any fighting. So I didn't. I let it go. I signed the papers, I took my $5,600, and I let my sister keep her house and her freedom and the money that was supposed to be my mother's. And I want to be clear that this is not a story about how letting go set me free. That's the version people want. The neat bow. It didn't set me free, it just let me stop bleeding in public. I lost more than money. I want to make sure that lands, because the money was never really the wound. The wound was that the person who explained our father's leaving to me when I was 9, who told me it wasn't my fault, turned out to be a person who could look at me across a casserole every Sunday for 2 years, hold our mother's hand, cry real tears, and the entire time be quietly walking our mother's house out the door behind my back. The wound was that I didn't know her, that the closest person in my life was, in this one enormous way, a stranger, and I'd handed her power of attorney in a hospital cafeteria because I trusted her the way you trust your own arm. I don't have a sister anymore. That's just true. We're not estranged in a dramatic way. There's no feud, no sides being taken at family events, because there are no more family events. There's just a quiet that's gone on so long now it's become the shape of things. I unfollowed her, eventually, not out of spite but because seeing Maddie's prom photos pop up, seeing my sister's life carry on intact and smiling on the money that was supposed to be my mother's, was a thing I couldn't keep doing to myself. Last Christmas, she sent a card. Just a card, one of those Costco photo cards. The whole family in matching flannel in front of a tree, and on the back she'd written, in the handwriting I'd know anywhere, the handwriting from the permission slips, just, I miss you, I'm sorry, whenever you're ready. And I stood in my kitchen holding it for a long time, and then I put it in a drawer, the same drawer, and I haven't answered it and I don't know if I ever will. People ask me, the few people who know the whole story, they ask me if I forgive her. And I've stopped pretending I have a clean answer. Some days I think I do. Some days I think forgiveness is too big a word, and what I actually have is just tiredness. The way a wound stops hurting not because it heals, but because the nerve finally gives up. Some days, 4 in the morning days, I don't forgive her at all. I want to drive to Akron and stand in her living room and make her look at me. Most days, I just miss her, which is the cruelest part, because the person I miss is the same person who did it, and you can't separate them. I've tried. Here's what I know now that I didn't know in that cafeteria. I know that the people who steal from their dying parents are almost never villains in capes. They're people drowning who found a quiet pool of money and told themselves a story. I know that the business side and the caregiving side should never be the same person and should never be different people who don't show each other the bank statements. that the loving division of labor we made was the exact mechanism that allowed it. I know that power of attorney is one of the most powerful documents a person can sign, and most people, including me, sign it the way you click agree on an app. I know that if you are ever the hands-on one, the diapers and dignity one, you must also be the one who logs into the bank account every single month. Not because you don't trust the other person, but precisely because you do. Because love is exactly the blindfold that makes it possible. And I know one more thing, which is the only thing in this whole story I'd call a gift. And it's small and it's bitter, but it's real. In those 2 years, I had her. My mother. I had her in a way Camille never did and never will. I had the early mornings and the slow afternoons and her good hand in mine, and the way her face would go soft when I sang to her the way she used to sing to me. Camille bought our mother's house out from under her, but I had the actual woman, the failing, furious, tender woman, every day at the end. And that's the one thing in this story that can't be borrowed against or sold off or split 50-50. It's just mine. I paid for it with 2 years of my life, and it cost me my sister, and it was worth it. It was worth all of it. I still have the casserole dish, by the way, the one Camille used to bring on Sundays. It got mixed in with my mother's kitchen things somehow, ended up in the box I took home, and I found it months later and just stood there holding it. I use it now. I make my son the same baked ziti our mother used to make, in my sister's dish, in my own kitchen, 4 hours from the house that doesn't exist anymore. And sometimes I think about how a family doesn't usually break the way you'd expect, with a bang, with a clear villain and a clear day it ended. Sometimes it just goes quiet. The texts get shorter. The water goes out. And one day you're standing in your kitchen with a casserole dish that belongs to a stranger you used to love, making dinner for your own kid, and you realize the silence has been the answer all along.